We stood on the same path, but it felt like an invisible river flowed between us. I only looked at the tips of my shoes. What words should I say? What must I choose? To erase all my past, arrogance and foolishness. Even the color of the wildflowers on the roadside was so vivid, it was painful. After a long silence, I was the one who spoke first. My throat was dry, my tongue felt stiff. I couldn't look at your face, I just stared at the ground and laid out the most honest sentences I had prepared. My feelings and my wishes have not changed. The moment I spoke those words, I knew I had put down all my shields. I was completely defenseless now. On your single word, my whole world would be decided. But if you do not wish it, I will be silent forever. It felt like all the time in the world had stopped. Then you lifted your head and faintly you smiled. Only then could I finally breathe. The hand I offered you took that warmth, melted away my longest winter. Sand was hot, the sound of the waves breaking. I was sitting alone under a parasol. All the noise of the world sounded distant, as if it had nothing to do with me. Then far away they appeared, a group moving like a single living thing. They were laughing in a language all their own. The sound was too far away, and to me it was just a vague sound, like the cry of a seagull. There was one among them, a girl in a black beret, her eyes not looking at me but at the sea. I couldn't know what she was thinking. Eventually They pass me by, the scent of salt and sun. And for just a moment their laughter sounded sharp and clear. I couldn't get up from my seat, I just watched their backs as they grew smaller and smaller, melting into the landscape. After they disappeared at the end of the promenade, only the sound of the waves was left, as if nothing had happened at all. The artist's studio was full of the strange smell of varnish and turpentine. Light poured in through the window, and canvases leaned against the walls beneath it. In the paintings, the sea looked solid like the land, and the harbor seemed to ripple like water. It was the kind of afternoon where everything was out of its proper place. And you were there, on an old chair stained with flecks of paint. You were sitting quietly, the girl I saw on the beach just a few days ago. I pretended not to notice and looked at a painting nearby. It was a painting of a harbor. It was a strange thing. The painted sea on the wall seemed alive, breathing with real waves. But you, sitting and breathing in front of me, felt more like a well-drawn picture. As every landscape gently bypassed me, I stood in the middle of it all, like a stranger. The legs that ran along the shore were now placed neatly under the chair. The sound of your laughter carried on the wind could not be heard now. You just lowered your head, looking at your fingertips. I looked at the faint crease in your dress for longer than I looked at any painting on the wall. The sound of brushes being rinsed in water from far away, time like wet oil paint was drying slowly, so very slowly. The 3 o'clock light spilled long across the floor of my room. The sound of cicadas was sticky, the air high. You came in without a sound and sat on the edge of my bed, a small sound as your bare feet met the cold tile floor. A page of my half-read book turned over in the breeze. I just watched it happen. The blue shirt you'd taken off was draped carelessly over the back of my chair, and strangely the whole landscape of the room seemed to rearrange itself around that shirt. My desk, my book, even the view outside the window. I couldn't look at you directly, so I looked at other things. The thin white mark from your watch, the soft hair on the nape of your suntan neck, your breathing, a steady sound closer than the cicadas. I just looked down at the meaningless lines on my own palm. And then you said my name. It was a very low voice, I couldn't answer. Instead I heard the second hand of the clock on the wall tick tock. Suddenly it was the loudest sound in the world. Our time flowing at the same speed. I still couldn't raise my head. The center of my world was still your blue shirt hanging on the chair. It seemed to hold your faint warmth and the smell of soap. The bicycle saddle made an old clumsy sound with every move we made. I held the back of it tight so you wouldn't fall. Just look ahead, you have to look ahead, I said. But you kept turning back to look at me and laughing. The dirt from your fall was still on your knee. And for a very short moment I held my breath and let go of you with both hands. That brief instant when you move forward, one step, two steps on your own. It felt like the world was moving in slow motion. When you finally looked back, your face was about to cry, and then broke into a smile, bright like a child's. That's when it happened, without any promise. A rain shower began to pour from the sky. We pedaled frantically, the raindrops soaked our hair and clothes in an instant, and the road became a river. All the sounds of the world were erased by the rain. and I could only hear the warmth of you pressed against my back and the sound of your heart. It was okay that I couldn't see clearly. We didn't need to know where we were going. That afternoon with just this one creaking bicycle, it felt like we owned the whole world. As the rain began to quiet it down, the sun in the air began to play a sweet and simple tune, that melody lingering in my ear. The still wet road and the sound of the rusty chain on the bicycle, all of it I thought would be remembered for a very long time. The lights of the last train disappeared in the distance. The Paris night was deep, the air cool like wine. We walked on the wet pavement, leaving only the sound of our footsteps. When we reached a narrow, empty alley, you suddenly stopped, and then, as if there was nothing left in the world but you, me, and the city streetlights, you began to slowly dance right where you stood. The orange streetlight followed your movements, creating a long, soft shadow on the bridge across the Seine. A tour boat glided by. Its lights illuminated your face brightly for just a moment, before disappearing into the darkness. That fleeting moment, I captured it in my mind like a photograph. We stopped in front of the window of an old jazz club. The sound of a saxophone spilling out, faint cigarette smoke, and the sound of people laughing. You leaned your forehead against the glass, just watching it all. The club's blue neon sign painted a picture on your face. And then you turned to look at me and smile. In that moment, all the noise of the world disappeared. The jazz from the club, the distant sound of a siren, no sound at all could be heard. It felt like only your laughter was the only music in this deep night. The back of the taxi disappeared disappeared down the alley, and as if by promise, the rain began to fall. We took shelter from the rain beneath the eaves of an old shop. The air quickly took on a damp weight from your window. A warm light spilled out. Beneath that light, the faint sound of familiar laughter and people talking. Your home was right there. The sound of the rain erased the world, and we lost our way back. The damp hem of your dress and your helpless gaze, the few centimeters of distance between our almost touching shoulders. I couldn't say anything and just leaned against the wet wall. How much time had passed? The laughter from inside stopped. In a very small voice, you said, I should go up now. After your figure completely disappeared into the darkness, I was left alone, leaning against the wet wall, watching the street light bleeding across the puddles for a very long time. The rain had not yet stopped. Inside a second-hand shop, it was warm with sunlight, and in the air very old dust motes were swimming at their own pace. You were wandering between the endless boxes. Each time you bent over, your hair would sparkle in the faint light. Oh. I didn't know what you were looking for, but I could tell how important it was to you. It was like you were searching among all the forgotten things of this world for a single sign only you could recognize. And then your hand stopped, touching your fingertips was one old worn out cassette tape. You lifted it carefully if it were so fragile it might break at any moment. It felt as if our entire past, all the time we thought we had lost, was held intact inside that small square piece of plastic. You just stared down at it quietly, maybe from relief or from something else. Your shoulders trembled just a little. We said nothing, no words were needed in that moment. In the car on the way back, you didn't look out the window. You just kept fiddling with the tape. You got back as if you would never let it go again. We walked down an empty autumn forest path. The sound of dry leaves crumbling was the only conversation between us, steady and rhythmic. As always, you walked half a step ahead of me. I just watched the small balls of pollen on the back of your sweater. Into a deep place where the sun didn't reach, you walked without hesitation, not wanting to lose sight of you. I widened my steps without realizing it. A bird cried out sharply and flew past just over our heads. You stopped there. It was a well that had dried up long ago. You placed your white hand on the cold stone that covered it. It's so deep you can't see the bottom. If someone fell in, you wouldn't hear a thing. Your voice was so quiet. I swallowed hard. I didn't look into the well. Instead I looked at your long white fingers resting on the stone. I will never ever let you fall in there. I said the words too small to be called a promise. Oh, oh. Instead of an answer, you just started walking seabed, where the water had receded, was a gray world with no end in sight. Far in the distance, like a mirage, the abbey was floating. We took off our shoes. Beneath our feet the damp cold sand softly swallowed our feet. The hem of your white dress grew heavy, dragging on the wet ash-colored mud. The wind blew, shaking our hair and our clothes. We had no word when you stumbled. I reflexively grabbed your arm. Instead of saying thank you, you looked again towards the distant spire. I too followed that gaze. In this vast landscape, we grew smaller and smaller. From some point on, the boundary between sky and earth had no meaning. We didn't know where this was or where we were headed. We were just next to each other, taking our own separate steps. The sound of the doorbell in the night air was clean and sharp. When the door opened, warm light and the sound of a familiar carol poured out. You stood in that light, and he was there next to you. All the words I had practiced vanished inside my throat. I just smiled. It must have been a strange expression. Without a word I held up the thick sketchbook I was holding in my arms. The sound of the first page turning felt strangely clear over the loud carol music. Your eyes lingered on my clumsy handwriting. That gaze read my sentences, my words, my heart. One by one, the moments you tucked your hair back, the afternoons you'd laugh for no reason, the small secret pieces of time I had saved, hidden from you. If you erase all the noise of the world, all the excuses and all the reasons it can't be, what's left for me in the end is just one simple simple sentence on the last page, the only truth I could write. And you stared at that one sentence for a very long time. Quietly I closed the sketchbook and turned away. When your lips touched my cheek for a moment, I felt a brief warmth. And then again, the cold winter air. I took a deep breath of that air. I was okay. On the road I walked alone. Clean snow was falling. You said you had to leave. Your back as you turned looked like a solid wall I could never climb. I followed you out to the porch, and right at that moment, as if by a promise, the sky fell apart all at once. We stood under the old porch roof, hiding from the rain. I asked you then if this was really the end, if our summer could be something that was over so easily. Your voice through the noise of the rain was sharp when it flew and hit me. Why didn't you write me a single letter? It wasn't a question, it was a wound that had festered for a long, long time. I wrote to you every day, I answered for a whole year, every single day. And in that instant, I saw it in your eyes, the sound of a small crack appearing on the hard wall of your resentment. Your eyes were shaking like a lost child. We finally knew it then, that something scarier than 7 years of time was a truth that never arrived. You ran to me and you kissed me. What was streaming down your face? Was it the cold rain or your warm tears? I couldn't tell, maybe they were mine. All the questions stopped, the 7 years that stood between us were being washed away by this pouring rain. All that was left was the sound of two hearts beating so close. our shadows were stretched long, so very long. The sun was setting, and in the air was a mix of damp earth and leaves. We walked side by side for a long time without a word. The sound of our clothes brushing against each other felt like the loudest thing in the world. I didn't know what I should say, so I just looked down at the tips of my shoes. And then you were the first to speak, in a voice so low it was almost not there. The things I said last time, you stopped there and let out a long breath. It felt as if that single breath carried all of our misunderstandings, all of the painful times we had been through. My feelings, you continued, have not changed in the least since then. But if you do not wish it, I will be silent on this subject forever. I lifted my head in the light of the setting sun. Your eyes were shining so red and so very clear. Looking at those eyes, the one single answer trapped inside me for so long just flowed out on its own. We started to walk again, side by side. This time our shadows were very close. The sun was almost all gone, but strangely the world looked much brighter than before. The hand you offered me, I took it without a moment's hesitation. That hand was so